Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Moving to Australia podcast. There are quite a few people who enter or lodge an application to enter Australia on a temporary visa as they are in a relationship with an Australian citizen or a permanent resident who sponsors the applicant's visa. These visas could be temporary partner visa +820, provisional partner visa +309, dependent child visa +445, distinguished talent visa +858, or prospective marriage visa +300. Sometimes the applicant must cease their relationship with the sponsor as they have experienced domestic and family violence. Now, the Government of Australia defines domestic and family violence as any conduct that makes you fear for your or your family's safety and well-being. In such a situation, there are family violence provisions available to the victims. They may be eligible to apply for a permanent visa under such provisions, provided the violence occurred during their relationship with their former sponsor, who was also the perpetrator of the said violence. To discuss all these provisions available, in the studio with me is Amitava Deb. Good afternoon, Amitava. Welcome to our studio.
Good afternoon, Arun. Good afternoon, everyone.
So, Amitava, tell me, how do we define what is considered family violence, and can you give me some examples of what this includes?
Okay. This is a very sensitive topic. Violence, domestic and family violence in any form is not acceptable. And violence does not have to be physical abuse. A lot of people think that violence means you've beaten your partner, it's violence. No. It could be physical, it could be verbal or emotional. It could be a social abuse, which is, you cut off your partner from family and friends. Could be financial abuse, lots of abuses, sexual abuse. So violence in any form is not acceptable in Australian law. So anyone who has come to Australia to be with a partner, build a life, and they have gone through the relationship and they are waiting for the second stage where their application will be finalized. In between, if their relationship breaks down, then of course they do not qualify for the second stage. But during that process, the relationship has not broken down, or maybe there has been physical violence involved. Then if the applicant is able to prove that, there are certain provisions whereby the applicant still can get the permanent residence.
What are those situations that they need to prove?
So basically, they have to first notify the department, notify Home Affairs through their IMI account. They have to notify relationship cessation form and indicate that the relationship is ending because there is violence. Now, it is important to prove to the department that they were in a relationship when it happened and then the relationship ended. There are many ways it can be done.
What are the legal ways of doing it?
So first of all, you have to prove that you have been together till the violence happened. And that could be proven through your household domestic arrangements, the financial aspects of the relationship, the social aspects of the relationship, the commitments to each other. These are the standard things that we provide when we apply for the partner visa. And then we have to provide evidence of the family violence. The most popular one and the most acceptable one is a judicial evidence. If there is a court order, I got one yesterday from a client. If the court accepts and provides a document, a decree saying there has been violence and the proceedings are going to continue, that is good evidence. There are non-judicial evidence as well. Non-judicial evidences include medical evidence, a medical report, a hospital report, a declaration from a medical practitioner indicating that a violence has occurred, certifying that violence has occurred. It could be a police report. The applicant could go to the police station and make a FIR, first investigation report. It could be from a child welfare officer. If there's a child involved, there could be. In many cases, there's a child as well. And the child is also part of the abuse. There's a child welfare officer in Australia.
Is it considered domestic violence only if the partner or the spouse involved or the child involved is physically harmed, or is it also considered domestic violence if there is harm to a person's pet or their property? Is that also considered domestic violence?
And it's not always just the physical violence, but physical violence, of course, in most cases easier to prove. But other forms of violence, which I indicated earlier, are not so easy. Emotional violence and social violence, those kind of things are difficult to prove. But they are also, those abuses are also violence.
Okay. So how does the DHA support the victims and work with them to resolve their immigration matters?
So once the documents are sent to the Home Affairs, they will then have their own experts determine seriousness of the submission and whether the violence has actually occurred, because in many cases violence may not have occurred. So all these have to be determined. If there is a court order, then it's more or less strong evidence for the violence. So all these grounds have to be investigated by Home Affairs.
Once you claim that you've been a victim of domestic violence through your account, do the visa officers reach out to you to try to get to know the situation?
Yes, they do. They will ask for further evidences. They may ask a lot of questions. One of the things they do is, as soon as you notify that domestic violence has happened and you notify cessation of relationship, Home Affairs will revoke the access to the file from the ex-partner as well as any migration agent that is involved.
Your privacy is completely shielded.
Protected, yes.
Okay. Now, does the DHA report the matter to the police?
The police report has to be done by the applicant. Home Affairs do not report to the police.
Is there any financial support available to the victims?
So there are several support organizations. The victim should contact them, social welfare organizations. Support could be in the form of accommodation. They're thrown out of their home. So there are organizations like St. Vincent's, they provide support. Now, financial support, there's no straightforward answer to this question. Those support organizations will try to assist as much as possible on a case-to-case basis.
Now, when a victim reaches out to the DHA through their email account and notifies them that they have been a victim of domestic and family abuse, how long would it take for DHA or this matter to resolve and then for them to move on to another visa? So they are now independent from their sponsor who was the perpetrator of this violence.
The Department of Home Affairs will take their own time. They have their own experts. They will have their experts assess the file. There'll be probably a lot of to and fro, a lot of questions asked. They might even question the ex-partner and then come to a conclusion. If the Home Department of Home Affairs feel that there has been domestic violence, then they might grant the visa, which is for the second stage, the PR. If they feel that the person, the applicant and the partner were not in a relationship when the domestic violence happened, and that the relationship ended much before that point, they may refuse to grant the visa. This is a very important point. So basically, if they can prove that, okay, the relationship has ended long and the applicant continued to stay, and then at some point violence happened, then they might say, when the violence happened, immediately before that you were not in a relationship, so we will not grant you the visa. It has happened to one of my clients. They refused the visa initially because They said you are not in a relationship. You should have reported that the relationship ended. And when the relationship ended, 6 months prior to the violence, you did not notify the Home Affairs that the relationship has ended. So they refused the visa. We went to the tribunal, and luckily in the tribunal she won. So it can be a long journey.
By the time you report this incident occurred to the DHA, and the DHA carries out their own investigation, and then they decide whether or not to grant you the next phase of the visa. If, for the sake of emotional support or financial support, that the victim needs to travel out of the country, what happens?
The victim can, because they will be holding subclass 820 partner visa.
The temporary partner visa.
Temporary partner visa, which is in effect until a decision is made on the permanent visa. And that temporary visa allows them to travel in and out. However, if there is a summons at the court or a hearing somewhere, then of course, they'll have to make some arrangements or adjust their travel plans.
If there is a court summon, and if this victim does need a lawyer, then who is going to take care of the costs involved? Does the DHA provide any kind of support to the person in a situation like that? Because now that person is been completely cut off from the sponsor. And if the sponsor was the only breadwinner, then what happens?
So they can apply for a waiver of the fees under exceptional circumstances. So there could be some waiver provisions.
Can you, without getting into too many details about your client, tell us what happened with your client who reached out to the DHA claiming domestic violence?
The client reached out to Home Affairs, and I'm sure the client will know who I'm talking about. Reached out. Now, in this particular instance, or the whole domestic violence scenario, you must understand that the perpetrator or the sponsor or the abuser, they can be very, very shrewd, and they will also have the resources to make sure you do not win. So in this particular instance, that person engaged very expensive lawyers to make sure you do not succeed. So that's what happened to her. The abuser was quite powerful, rich, and engaged a lawyer to ensure that, because if she wins, he will be marked. He will have a criminal record that he has been initiator of domestic abuse. So it's not going to work out well for him for his future employment prospects. So in this particular instance, this is what happened. She lost, and then she appealed, and the appeal ran for 3 years. So ultimately, after about 5 years or so, she was successful.
So for 3 years, how was she supporting herself, and on what visa did she remain here? Because if I'm not mistaken, partner visa is valid for 2 years, the provisional one?
No, provisional one is valid until the other one is granted.
Okay.
However, her partner visa was refused because they said there was no domestic violence. So at that time, she was on a bridging visa. And on that bridging visa, she had work rights. And she was working. She was a dentist.
I'm glad that she won and she got the outcome that she had hoped for.
Yeah, and now she is a citizen.
Good for her. And yeah, thank you for supporting her. So if those of you are listening, if you or someone you know is in danger, then
just
please
contact
call
us.
the police on 000 if you're in Australia. That is the emergency helpline number.
And if you don't know what to do, just call me.
Yes,
Anytime.
Amitava's number is anyways listed on our website, and you can also follow him on LinkedIn or reach out to him on LinkedIn, and his personal details as far as his social media is concerned will be available in the podcast description.
Yep.
So thank you for talking to us, Amitava. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you for listening, everyone. Yeah, and see you next week again. Thank you. Bye.